Hello and welcome to Better Chords Part 2. In Part 1, we took a look at how to construct these chords on the guitar using smaller chord shapes known as shell chords. And in this video, we are going to take a look at how to theoretically conceptualize these chords and where these chords might be most appropriate. Hence the big chart in front of us here. So let's dive in and get started. All right, so let's take a look at this chart that I have here, and let's make a few observations off the get-go. Now, the first one is we basically have a major scale spelled down this way, C, D, E, F, G, A, and B. And then, with every single chord, all these guys here, instead of writing the scale out in this manner, I'll show you here, instead of writing them out here, C, D, E, F, G, A, B, and C. Instead of writing the scale out that way and then trying to identify, okay, 1, 3, 5, 7, and then so on and so forth, I've actually written the chords out in thirds. So, C, D, E, F, G, A, B, C, D, E, F, G, and then A. And what this gives us is really the scale as it would appear in chord harmony. We start with the triad, and then we build up, we add another third to that, we get the 7 chord, and then what we get beyond that are these things called tensions. Sometimes people call them extensions. I call them tensions, and I call this group of 3 of these guys the tension triad. So, that's how everything is laid out over there on the right. Over here on the left, I have some simple chord symbols, and we're going to ignore the modal stuff for right now, so I'm actually going to highlight that in red, because that's going to be another video where I talk about modes, but the sneak peek for you guys here, mode is often, I think, taught improperly. When we think of modes, we really need to think of moods of music. So, let that be a little teaser for you guys, and we'll talk about that in some future lessons. Now, let's go back to this idea. We're talking about chords today, so here we have the chord functions within a given key. And the key that we're in today, because it's much easier to visualize, is C major, obviously. And I wrote these as chord functions because the 2 chord, although it's minor, doesn't really have the same musical function as the 3 chord or the 6 chord, although they're all minor 7 chords when we look at them in that regard. They really sound very different. Chord function, this is a little bit different from your classical sense of chord function, and by that I mean it's not tonic, supertonic, mediant, subdominant, dominant, submediant, leading tone, all that stuff. That's good to know, really just to know. But as far as, I guess, our everyday language of music, that stuff is less important. The big ones to know would be 1 being the tonic, and the 5 being the dominant, okay? So, tonic and dominant, those are the most important ones out of that sort of thing. But I call these the chord functions, built off the scale tones 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and 7. So, here's how to understand how to build these nice big lush chords, use other notes within the scale or even not of the scale in appropriate places. Let's take the 1 chord here for right now. So, the 1 chord, the C major 7, we're in the key of C. This is 1, the 1 chord. Of course, we have the triad available, right, to add. We all play C chords before. C major 7, that's cool. That's great to use. But then when we get into this idea of tensions, okay, so which ones sound good? Which ones do I want to use? And we can actually take a look at this. Now, you can play anything. Put any sort of note you want on a C chord and decide for yourself whether you like that sound or you don't like that sound. That can be up to you. But we can help ourselves a little bit by actually looking at how the tones are related to one another. So if we compare the tension triad over here to the original triad, the bass triad, if we compare the 1, 3s, and 5s from the 9, 11, and 13, we can see which notes will most likely sound good and which ones won't by seeing where the half steps lie. So let me get all of this clutter out of the way, and let's go through our notes. So D and C, that's a whole step, right? So that D probably sounds good on a C major triad, and it does. E and F are a half step apart, so that one's probably not going to be as cool. And notice I put that in red because that's an avoid note. A void note isn't necessarily bad or anything. It's just something that might not sound as pleasing to us. And then, of course, G and A, that's another whole step. And that sounds pretty good there as well. If I actually take that triad, so C, E, and G, and I add a D to it, we all know that chord. That's called C add 9. And that's often what we play, like, second chord of Sweet Home Alabama and second chord of Sweet Child of Mine. It's that, classic rock D, C, and G chord progression. We all play that, the one that's very similar to a G chord. If we play C, E, G, and A, that's called a C6 chord because we are playing the 6th degree. And if we look at this, it's kind of hard to kind of see that would be 6, but here's a little quick cheat sheet for you. 9 is the same thing as 2, 11 is the same thing as 4, and 13 is the same thing as 6. So I'll leave that up there. I mentioned that adding F to that might not sound very good, but it's not like we never do that. Sometimes we have a chord like a C sus 4, which means we're going to take our triad C, E, and G. The sus part of it means let's replace the third. We're going to get the third out of there, and we're going to replace it with the fourth, hence C sus 4. We could also do something called a C sus 2, which would be replacing it with a D, C sus 2. Sometimes we'll also see this, like C2, and that could be really kind of the same thing as C, E, G, and then adding D to that, or not even playing this and just playing C, D, and G, whatever. Because the 9 is available, it's an available tension for us, we can kind of throw it anywhere on that scene chord, and it's going to work. So let's take a look. Let's take a look at some other chords. I'm just going to go down the line here for time. So if we take a look at the 2 chord, check this out. Every single note on the 2 chord is available. So there's a lot of options we have with 2. Less options, so with 3, we don't have a 9 and we don't have a 13 available on the 3 chord. And then 4, we go back to, look at that, everything is available on the 4 chord. There's a lot of options we have there. Okay, let's take a look at 5. 5 is very similar to the 1 chord, everything except 11 or everything except 4. And 6, everything except 13, sounds good on a 6 chord. And 7 is kind of special, like, raise your hands in the audience how often you play a B minor 7 flat 5, not in a jazz context, right? It's not very often. Sometimes we can get, we can actually play this voicing, a minor 7 flat 5 voicing, on something like a G7. And if we see exactly what we're doing there when we do that, I'm going to highlight B, D, F, and A. That's our B minor 7 flat 5. Take a look at this. That voicing is right there. So sometimes blues players, instead of playing like a straight G7 chord on a G, in like a G blues, they might actually place their hands in a B minor 7 flat 5 chord shape, a B minor 7 flat 5 chord voicing, and they actually get, well, let's see, 1, 3, 5, 7, and 9. They get the sound of a G9. So we'll see guys like Robin Ford and Josh Smith do this, where instead of playing, like a bar chord G7, they actually play a B minor 7 flat 5, and they get that G9 sound. That's a cool way of doing that type of thing. We can do that with other things. I mean, let's take a look at the one chord again. One chord, we actually have a G triad in here. So if you play a G with C in the bass, you get the sound of a C major 9 with no third. And the third is implied. The third is always going to be implied in our bass triads here. All of these, in fact, are going to be kind of implied, unless we have some sort of alteration like a sharp 5 or a flat 5 or something like that. So what else could we take a look at? Maybe something on a minor chord. We could see, if we go to 6, we, of course, have a C major triad that's in there. We also have an E minor triad in there. And that would give us more sound. So if we take a look at the E minor triad, and even an E minor 7 chord, if we play an E minor 7 chord voicing on top of an A minor 7, we get the sound of an A minor, goes all the way up to 11. Goes all the way up to 11. So that's one sort of, that's a very pianoistic way of taking a look at it. Or what we were talking about in video 1 is counting through a scale shape to find where these notes would be for 9. Oh, hang on. I just broke it. There we go. And we're back. We were counting up through a scale shape to find 9, 11, and 13. And we'll do that here in a second. I have a backing track in C major that's prepared that is this chord progression. It's an A minor to an F to a C and then to an E. Now the E is actually out of key. It's not E minor 7 like we see in the key, but that's okay. Sometimes music doesn't revolve around just purely diatonic harmony. Sometimes we use something called tonal harmony. And tonal harmony basically works by chords of tension, dominant chords, resolving tonally or to the chord it wants to lead to. That's why I have this circle of fourths up here. Circle of fourths gives us all the dominant resolutions. So chords resolve dominantly by going around the circle clockwise. So E wants to resolve dominantly to A, just like A would want to lead to D, and D leads to G, and G leads to C. So a surefire way of writing a complete sounding chord progression would be putting a cadence on the end. So a cadence is just something resolving dominantly. How often have we played songs that, are playing, maybe we play a little bit of G, we play a little bit of C, we play a little bit of E minor, we play a little bit of C, and then D, and then we land back on G and we end. And that sounds, it sounds like we finished the song. It sounds like we completed our task. That's because that D was resolving dominantly over to our friendly neighborhood G chord. So, in the context of our chord progression over here, that's where we see this E wanting to resolve dominantly to our A chord. So this E is actually an implied E7. E dominant 7. We're going to treat it as such, and we're going to have some interesting things that we can do on that chord. So in particular, I am going to play through these chords first with open chords, and then I'm going to play them with shell chords, the shell chords that we went over in part 1. So we'll have an A minor 7. We'll have an F major 7. This triangle means major 7. We'll have a C major 7. And then we'll play E7 because of that dominant resolution. All of these guys are out of the key, right? So A minor 7, C major 7, and F major 7. And then I'm going to add these to it. I'm going to play an A minor 11. I'm going to play an F major 9, one of my favorite chords. Then I'm going to play a C6. And then I'm going to play E7 sharp 9. Bonus points if you know what this chord is. And I'm going to give you the answer in 3, 2, 1. It's the Hendrix chord. Yeah, Cool. And then I'm going to finish this all up with playing these chords that are a little extra fancy. A minor 9, F major 7, sharp 11, C major 9 with 6. That's actually C major. Let me fix that. C major 6 9. I can't write anything. C major 6 9. There we go. And then we're going to finish it up with E7 flat 9. And on all of these, I'm actually going to voice a B note on top. And that's a really handy way of using some of these really big chord voicings, is keep a consistent note on the highest part of the chord. You'll get all these kind of crazy, complicated ones in here, but it can also give your listener something to grasp onto. So if the chords are really big and complicated, it still sounds like they all go together. Check out this example. This will give you more context in how these sound. I'm only going to play whole notes through this progression so you can really hear the colors in the chords, okay? Check it out.